But we are officially 52 games into the season, Ethan. So there are 30 games left for the San Antonio Spurs. And as I opened up the episode, we're not going to just talk about team defense and rebounding and points in the paint, the things that you guys have already heard us blabber on and on about for the past couple post games. And even before the De'Aaron Fox trade, those were things that we've been talking about. I mean, really, I hate to put it this way, Ethan, but since Zach Collins has been on the team, even though he just got traded in February, we have been talking about the interior. Am I there?
Yeah, you're
Can
here.
you hear me? Okay. It froze a little bit for me, so I got scared after earlier in the episode. But the point is, since he was on the team, the past like 2-3 years, the interior defense and just having a physical presence off the bench in the paint has been something that has been an issue for the Spurs. So we won't get into all of that. But there was something else that we talked about last episode that I wanted to get into. And that's essentially just the idea that the Spurs are doing a soft tank. And, you and I, we're not usually the person to like have tinfoil cappy ideas. We try to stay, in reality and look at it from an objective lens. But when you continue to play Jeremy Sohan off the bench and you continually are in a rebound deficit and a points in the paint deficit, and you just brought in De'Aaron Fox, and that's the thing that's keeping, games against the Wizards close, and then also causing you to, even when like the Celtics game, for example, as much as that was a really bad game for the Spurs, late in the game, they still actually cut it to single digits, and there was some semblance of a chance, but still, you didn't have a chance because at the end of the day, you're at a 10-point deficit in the paint. So with all of that being said, sorry, I was losing my train of thought. Getting back to the soft tank. When you're not putting somebody out there, when you sign Bismack Biyombo and you don't play him, and we'll see what happens with Charles Bassey. Maybe they'll play Charles Bassey when he comes back. But before Charles got hurt, we were playing Charles intermittently, but still the majority of the minutes were Jeremy Sohan at center. So when you continually do that, that makes me start to think about things like this and be like, okay, how would this make sense? Well, it would make sense if you were trying to not make the playoffs and get yourself another lottery pick. And this is something that people, like a couple months ago, blah, blah, blah was one of them. And then there were some others that I'm forgetting as well that suggested this in the comments, that maybe the Spurs are trying to, just keep themselves just out, of the play-in so that they can have those 2 lottery picks and then, be rebuilt and ramped up even more for next season. And here's another aspect that I didn't think about as well. We've all been talking about De'Aaron Fox's ring finger and his pinky finger. If we don't make the playoffs, he can get surgery quicker on that, which we know he needs to get. And there was another aspect of this that I wanted to touch on, but essentially, a soft tank actually explains some of the things that are going on with the Spurs right now. And when you start to actually think of it from that perspective, like I said, it might explain why we're not playing a Bismack Biyombo or, signing a Mo Bamba or a Daniel Theis.
Yeah, I just don't. Maybe I just don't want to believe it, Jude. But I'm afraid I don't have a rebuttal if after All-Star break, actually starting Thursday against the Suns, we don't start to see some significant rotational changes. And maybe it takes a couple of weeks, but I'm going to give it 2 weeks before I make any assertions. Is that the right word?
Yes.
But if after a couple of weeks we're still rolling the same team out there, we have Bismack on another 10-day and he's just sitting on the bench. We have Charles Bassey still injured, and we continue to play Jeremy Sohan at the backup center, and we continue to lose in the same way that we're losing, then I will be 100% behind you and that theory of, the Spurs we just don't want to win. We're trying to get as high of a lottery pick as possible that we can pair next to our Atlanta pick. And maybe we try and package a trade this offseason. Who knows what the end goal is. But if that happens after 2 weeks, then I will be behind that theory.
So here's the other thing, just to dive into that a little bit more. So if we have the higher lottery pick, then obviously that's going to lead to higher draft picks. Which even if you want to trade those, that's higher value. Or if you want to draft, obviously higher value as well there. Um, and you could theoretically, if you think from that lens, you could address your needs that you do need to address better in the offseason. And here's the other key thing about this as well: the Spurs aren't going to win the championship this year. Even if they made a postseason run and they made a postseason push and made it in, and even like won the play in, which I think is a little bit of a stretch, but just for conversation, right? Then they're going to be in a 7 seed or an 8 seed matchup against the Thunder. You
Yeah,
know,
I
like it. And so now with that being said, Ethan, this is another thing I wanted to get into. That's not what I would want to do or prefer to do, but I'm just trying to think of this from a different perspective with what we've seen in these 5 games with De'Aaron Fox.
I get it, and when I remove the emotion from it, I maybe even support it because you're right. We're not going to get into the
That's
second round. We do need more talent on this team if we're looking to become competitive. And having 2 high lottery picks would be really beneficial. But I think as the emotional side of me, the fan, that we've made moves consistent with
yeah,
winning. We traded for De'Aaron Fox, and we in the offseason, we said every word about winning. We brought in CP3, Harrison Barnes. The whole theme of training camp was we're here to compete. We're here to make the playoffs. That's the goal. We want to be in the playoffs. And for there to be a silent tank going on while all that's happening, would
literally
hurt.
right after you trade for De'Aaron Fox.
It would really hurt my heart. I get it, but it
Yeah,
hurts
that's
me.
that's the thought process that you just had, Ethan. That's the realization that I went through over the weekend. I've kind of ruminated on this since Wednesday because there was a comment that we had. I forget his name, but he was commenting a good bit on our Wednesday post game, and he said, "There's no way that Mitch Johnson like actually doesn't know basketball like this. We have to be like soft tanking or stealth tanking, like Floyd Kizzy says." And Robert Ball says it here: the soft tank is in all caps. Floyd Kizzy said, I think we may go for 10th, but no higher. I agree there. I think there could be a way where it works out where we're 10th. Now, with you, Ethan, like you just said, my personal opinion, if I was in charge of the Spurs, as much as I look at this, like you said as well, if you look at it from just an objective perspective, if we want like the best situation for the Spurs that we can control for next season, missing the play in and getting a higher draft pick would be better for us. Just if we're being, like you said, take the emotion out of it, take the fan glasses off. That's objectively what would be better for the franchise. Now, putting the fan glasses back on and taking in all of the context of the past couple years, we've been through 2 22-60 seasons. We just traded for De'Aaron Fox. Like, let's go for a push here and at least
Mhm.
try to get some playoff reps, even if we lose in the play-in or even if we do get our butts kicked by our biggest rival, OKC. Like I've heard people say, I don't want to go in there and get blown out by OKC when we could have a higher draft pick. And to be honest with you, like we just said, I don't disagree with their logic, but this season, I want to go push for the playoffs. My personal opinion of what I want to do if I was RC Buford,
Yeah.
or Mitch Johnson, that's what I want to do. I'm with you there. But if I think about what do I think is actually going on, that's where I'm at right now. Now, if we come out of the All-Star break and there's completely different lineup changes, it's just different rotations. Stefan's in the starting lineup, CP3's coming off the bench, and Charles Bassey is playing. Like if that's the case, then I'm going to be like, okay, no, we're actually probably trying to make a playoff push. But from what I've seen right now, if we continue to play, center Jeremy off the bench and CP3 and De'Aaron Fox in the starting lineup, and like I said, the rebounding and the points in the paint thing, if that continues to happen and we just continue to go with that, I refused. It's like I was very frustrated, and you're not able to see the forest through the trees sometimes when you're just caught up in it. But Mitch Johnson is not doing that intentionally. He's
Right.
being told to do that if they do that. And that's the thing. Like I totally get people being frustrated with Mitch Johnson, but like I said today, it's like I had the realization that might not. Well, if we're not trying to win,
Yeah.
then maybe it does make sense. You know what I mean? That's why he wouldn't be changing the lineups.
For sure. And I'm not a coach. I'm not in the
Uh
front
huh.
office. But if I were, and I was told that we're gonna try and silently tank and lose here, my fear would be, 1, continuing a culture of losing and being
Yeah,
okay with
yeah.
losing.
Um,
2, sending the wrong message to my players, and two franchise guys, 3 if you include Stefan and Victor and De'Aaron, and telling them, like, "We don't quite think y'all are good enough to compete, so we're gonna lose again." And then the question becomes, how long are we gonna be okay with that? Because what if next year we roll out and we start the season bad and
yeah.
we're the 11th seed? Are we gonna be like, all right, one more year of losing? You know what I mean? Like, where does it end? And then the last element of that, like, I don't want to get blown out by OKC either. Like, that would hurt to watch 4
Uh-huh.
games of us getting dominated. But I kind of like that, dude.
Me too. No, that would be
Victor,
better. That would be better long term for the Spurs.
yeah, one, it's reps, and we don't have to worry
Yeah.
about guys having, being the number 1 seed and getting beaten
Uh-huh.
by the 8th seed, for example. We don't have to worry about that if we lose now. But
Right.
also, Victor Wembanyama takes things personally. Wouldn't it be the best fuel in his tank to get stomped by a team in his
Yeah.
conference, in his division with a player like Chet Holmgren who's
Where he already
comparing
has
to
a
him?
rivalry.
I kinda want him to get his ass kicked, because even if he averages 30, 15, and 5 and we lose in
That's because
4,
you're thinking 5 years in the future, Ethan.
I am. I'm thinking about the revenge.
Yeah.
I'm thinking
Yeah.
about 2 years from now when we
Yeah.
play them 3 years in a row in the conference finals, and we win every single time because Victor remembers the bad taste of getting swept. Like, that's what I'm
Yeah.
after.
Yeah.
So, I'm fine with getting the 18th pick over the 10th pick or 9th pick if it means we're actually gonna get those meaningful reps and start taking steps toward being a competitive team again.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing that I'll touch on there, and this is another thing I've kind of ruminated on, and I want to say with all of this, this is kind of theory stuff. So, like we said, if there's lineup changes, after the All Star break, then obviously, a lot of the stuff we're talking about may not be the case. So we understand that this is speculative to an
It
extent.
is.
Um, but with that being said, I think there's a chance that this could be a part of the plan too, because you were saying like that culture of losing, right? And when I say part of the plan, I mean like De'Aaron knows this and Wemby knows this. And again, we'll see what happens in these last 30 games, and maybe some stuff happens in that disproves what I'm about to say here. But when I see the body language, like there is a little bit of frustration,
For
but they're
sure.
but they're not that mad, especially De'Aaron.
De'Aaron's totally fine, you're right,
Yeah,
but he's
and
used to that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And Victor's mad, but Victor's kind of just also like I feel like especially late in the game when we can't get a rebound, like it feels like he's like there's nothing else I could have done and we're running this lineup, so it's not like we could change anything. Like that's what I read on through a screen. Could be completely wrong. And then with De'Aaron, like I said, this is total conspiracy. We've never really done stuff like this, but we're doing it now. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying it's kind of funny because this really isn't. We don't usually get into this type
No,
of
we
stuff.
don't.
But De'Aaron, I feel like De'Aaron knows too, and he's just like, hey, let's get some reps in, go through this season. I'll get this surgery in the draft. There's a bunch of good bigs. We'll get whether it's the Duke center or somebody else. We'll draft somebody there that'll shore up the backup center position. We can get another guard. Maybe we'll get somebody in free agency, a 3-and-D sniper that can add, and then we'll really be ramped up. We'll have a whole summer to work out together. You see my train of thought here. And then next season, you know what I mean? We'll be set to really go. But again, like you said, as much as there's a lot of appeal to that and you can get excited about that kind of, right?
Mhm.
There's also like, okay, but again, how long are we going to just be like, yeah, we're cool with losing? You know what I mean? Like and
Mhm.
if that's the standard, who's to say that it's just for sure all going to work next year? You know what I
Yep.
mean? We don't have any evidence otherwise to say so. I mean, this year we took a big jump even before De'Aaron got here. So I have faith in that. And at the end of the day, I really do have faith in the Spurs. Um, but man, after that De'Aaron Fox trade, as we saw, we made a video. Our last clip, I think, on our channel is the playoff outlook. Like I really wanted to push for the playoffs, and I still want to. And while through all of this, I see the positives. Like I see the pros of being the 11 seed
Mhm.
and getting that second lottery pick. I really do. But man, I think just after these seasons, Ethan, like you said, we've been doing this podcast for 4 years and we haven't got a playoff race. And with De'Aaron, like we'd have a chance in a playoff game. We would, or play in game, excuse me, and maybe some playoff games. And I know that there's a lot of weaknesses now. If we're running Jeremy Sohan out there at center, maybe we wouldn't have as much of a chance in that play-in game that I'm talking about. But still, it's just been so long. We'd have 2 all-star level players, really 3 if you want to throw in Steph's potential as well. But with De'Aaron and Wemby, you want to see the playoffs, man. That's I'll wrap it up there.
You got to get Chris Paul in the playoffs. You just gotta. This could be his last year. You got to see him one more time when the games count. That's true. Fox a lot was losing 5 years before he finally got somebody to win with him. So.
Yeah, and Floyd Kizzy says this has surely been cleared with Wemby and Fox, the vets too. That's kind of basically what I was getting at, Floyd. Like with the way that De'Aaron, like he doesn't seem like he's like, hey, we're learning, but he's not really pissed at the losses. Like that was kind of what started connecting the dots in my head there, Ethan. But believe it or not, I actually do have a little bit more that I wanted to get to. I know that kind of wraps up that soft tank discussion. But lineup changes. We talked about that. Probably won't happen, but if they do, what are your preferred lineups post All-Star break?
I want De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell. Ooh, actually, you know what? Let me switch it up. Stephon Castle, Harrison Barnes, Jeremy Sohan, Victor Wembanyama. And off the bench, Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Mamu. And Bismack Biyombo.
No Chuck Bass?
Well, he's hurt.
Is he though? He might not be after the All-Star break, genuinely.
If he's back, then Chuck Bass over Bismack for sure. But yeah.
Okay. That was what I was.
A center.
Yeah, a center. All right, got you.
A real center would be most welcome.
So I came up with 2, Ethan. I came up with one that I called my pipe dream, and then I came up with my realistic. So okay. I'll go with my realistic first. And again, this is under the circumstance that we even change the lineups, which may not happen. De'Aaron Fox, Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, Harrison Barnes, Victor Wembanyama. And then off the bench, Chris Paul, Julian, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Bassie. Again, that's my realistic one. That's what I think could happen if they actually change. So let me, that's, people might hear that and be like, I disagree with some stuff. And I'd be like, I understand. Cause that's, like I said, that's my realistic one. If I had the choice, this is what I'd do. This is my pipe dream. De'Aaron Fox, Stephon, Julian, Jeremy, Wemby.
Okay.
Off the bench, CP3, Devin, Keldon, Harrison, Charles.
I think I like that one better, to be honest with you.
I do too. That's why that's my pipe dream. I just don't think they're going to do that one. But here, I'll talk a little bit about my thought process. So obviously, moving Stephon into the starting lineup, moving CP3 down, I think we kind of understand that one, right? Moving Devin to the bench and moving Julian to the starting lineup. Obviously, Stephon can play the 2, and Julian, off-ball shooter, 3-and-D guy, right? Fits right in. Off the bench, you have Devin now as kind of a creator next to Chris Paul, in isolation. So you have those 2 guys, you have 2 of those guys, not just one, kind of like in the starting lineup where you have multiple guys who can create. And then off the bench, you have Keldon and Harrison. And I know people have criticized Harrison's rebounding, but I think putting him next to Keldon can kind of mitigate that. And then, of course, you have Charles at center. And that's why I liked putting Jeremy in the starting lineup, because I think he can help out with Wemby rebounding-wise, but you still have De'Aaron Fox, Julian, and Wemby, for your shooting. And even Stephon, we've seen his shooting improve recently from deep. So I think that can continue to look better also. But yeah, I really like that lineup as well. That's what I'd do if I had full control.
That's better than mine. I honestly forgot about Julian, but we've seen how well he plays in the starting lineup compared to off the bench. I think that fit would be seamless. And then you still have, like the backup backcourt duo of Chris Paul and Devin. And and Harrison and Keldon. I think that's an underrated duo that we really haven't seen enough of is Harrison and Keldon. So shout out. That was a really good lineup.
And I think Harrison and Keldon, they kind of like Harrison is a more consistent shooter than Keldon,
For
and
sure.
Keldon is a better rebounder than Harrison. You see so they kind
Yep.
of like their
They
strengths and
complement each other.
weaknesses. Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was a
And
solid thing when I was thinking about it. But there were two more things. I know we're going long here, but they apply to on the court that don't have to do with team defense and rebounding.
mhm.
Wemby and De'Aaron Fox in the two-man game and in the pick and roll. Basically, just what we saw from Devin and Wemby last year, like at the end of the season, kind of come along. I want to see more of that from Victor and De'Aaron Fox. Obviously, I still want us to run sets. We talked about that. That was a big emphasis for both of us going into the season, that we want to have us run orchestrated, organized sets. I still want to see that. But I do want to see that pick and roll, pick and pop, and just that two-man game between Victor and De'Aaron, where it's just like, hey, screw it. Every few possessions, let's just do a pick and roll with Victor, or pick and pop with Victor and De'Aaron. And let's get some buckets going, whether it's a step back jumper for De'Aaron, or a
Mhm.
lob, drive to the rim leading to a fadeaway open three for Wemby on the wing. I just feel like there were some times where I didn't see that as much. Like, I want to get everybody involved, but I want to see that really kind of come to life in these last 30 games.
I would 100% agree with that, especially in the half court. And I would add to that, our pace of play needs to be top 3 in the league for sure, but that starts defensively. We need to get stops, we need to get rebounds, and when you have a guy like De'Aaron Fox and then Chris Paul in the second unit, there's no excuse for why we can't be pushing the pace every
Yeah.
single night and just sprinting up and down the court because we have the youth, we have the expertise in the playmaking. We just have to get some stops and rebounds on the other end.
I think when De'Aaron Fox, like we've already seen in the flashes that he shows how fast he can be, and
Mhm.
obviously we already knew that, but when he imposes his speed,
Yep.
I know impose is usually a word you think of with strength, but when he imposes his speed on the pace of the game, I mean, that can lead to so many easy buckets, and it just puts so much pressure on the defense, and
Yep.
especially in a pick and roll within a generational player like Victor.
For sure.
Okay, I gotta mention this. Spurs Spotlight with Chris. Y'all go check out his content on YouTube. He says Harrison Ingram snubbed from the rotations. I completely agree, especially with the rebounds he's been getting for the G League. Okay, I haven't talked a lot of G League this year, Ethan, but Harrison Ingram, look, we need rebounds. I know he's 6'5", but he's getting double digit boards in the G League. Maybe we need to throw him at the backup center position.
Hey man, I'd prefer him at backup center than Jeremy. Let Jeremy play his position for
Right?
God's sakes.
That might be a better front court, even though Harrison's 6'5".
I know, I know.
Oh my goodness. Okay, last thing. This is like the final last thing that we have here on today's episode. We've talked about this a lot, but I genuinely think it is a key thing. Because we talked about the soft tank, that doesn't mean that I'm going to like let things slide in evaluations. Like, just because if we don't change our lineups, just because that's the case, that doesn't mean I'm going to be like, oh well, just because some guys didn't execute, just kind of like we did the past 2 years. We'll let it slide a little bit because it's not, they're not really trying to win. When you add De'Aaron Fox, like the evaluation when it comes to the execution and the ante being up to, like we talked about when the trade first happened, that still sticks with me.
Hmm.
So I say all that to say that execution from Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson, both guys getting paid 20 million plus. And as much as, Devin has had, he had 2 games where he had 20 plus since the De'Aaron Fox trade. We just got to see more consistency from both of those guys. I think double digits. I mean, they're getting paid 20 million. I know, like we talked about, that's not the same as it was 10 years ago in the NBA, but
Mhm.
still, they're some of our highest paid players. They're some of our most tenured players. And I think at this point, especially with De'Aaron Fox coming in, like we said that night, there's the leash is not as long. We've got to see more consistency from those guys. And if we don't see it, then, we'll have to start, unfortunately, asking maybe if some decisions need to be made about players being better fits than they are potentially. I want them to fit perfectly. Like, I want Devin Vassell to stay here for the next 5 years as an off-ball sniper. I want Keldon Johnson to be, our sixth man, even if he's not the sixth man because we're adding so much talent. I want him to be that physical energizer, culture guy that brings physicality and pumps up his teammates, whether that be on drives or, on ball defense. You know what I mean? Like I want those guys to be those things. But if we're continuing to see, 2 shots on almost 10 attempts consistently, we'll have to start asking some questions.
Aligned.
Any thoughts on Devin or Keldon for yourself?
I would just echo everything that you said.
Gotcha. Spurs Spotlight with Chris. We could use some Dom Beasy right about now.
Rest in peace.
My guy missed a 3-pointer though in the corner that went off the backboard, and then he got the rebound. And this is like late game where they had a chance to. I think they were playing the Celtics, and he gets the rebound and he misses the putback.
No.
Oh. Hey, all energy and hustle, no matter what, from my boy Dom Beasy.
Never gives up.